In this video, we're going to take a look at matter in a pictorial view and be able to classify matter as a mixture or a pure substance. Additionally, we're asked to determine if the picture contains elements, molecules, and/or compounds. In order to be able to do this, we need to understand what we mean by these terms. And so let's take a look at some examples. First, we're asked to identify if the picture is a mixture or a pure substance. Now, if the picture is a mixture, the picture will contain different chemical species. Let's take a look at number 1. Some students would be tempted to think that number 1 is a mixture because it contains black and white dots. But notice the black and white dots overlap to create a 3-atom molecule. Because the dots are overlapping each other, we can assume that it is one thing, and therefore every single chemical species that's in the picture are all the same. Because of this, number 1 would be classified as a pure substance. On the other hand, let's take a look at picture number 2. If you take a look at picture number 2, not everything in the picture is the same. This white dot is different from this black dot, representing two different elements that are not chemically combined. If they were chemically combined, they would create a molecule and therefore would be a different situation. That's how you can classify something as a mixture. A pure substance and a mixture can be classified by taking a look at the picture and seeing whether or not everything is the same. Once you do that, you then need to determine if the picture contains elements, molecules, and/or compounds. First, let's talk about elements. A student might be tempted to think that every picture contains elements. After all, if it didn't contain elements, there would be nothing in the picture. And that's correct, but that's not what we mean when we talk about does the picture contain elements. For example, let's take a look at the first picture again. Does number 1 contain elements? Well, it contains elements, but the elements are combining together to create a molecule. And so number 1 does not contain elements purely in an elemental form. Number 2, on the other hand, would be an example that does contain elements. The white dot and the black dot would represent single atom elements. What about molecules? Molecules are defined as containing 2 or more atoms. Notice it says atoms, so those could be the same element or different. Number 1 would be an example that contains molecules because all of these chemical species contain 3 atoms that are chemically combined together. Once again, I know they're chemically combined because they're touching each other. In picture number 2, on the other hand, this does not contain molecules because none of the atoms are overlapping, signifying a chemical bond. Finally, let's figure out if the pictures contain compounds. Compounds is a little bit more restrictive in its definition. To know if you have a compound, it needs to contain 2 or more different elements. So if we take a look at picture number 1 again, number 1, if you recall, contained molecules. But number 1 also contains compounds, because if you look at each individual chemical species, you can tell that different elements are there. The black dot represents 1 element, and the white dots represent 2 elements. For example, this could be a picture of water molecules. In number 2, there are no compounds in here. Yes, there are different elements, for sure, but they're not overlapping to create a compound. So knowing this, let's take a look at some examples. We're going to actually focus down on 7, 8, and 9. Okay, let's first go through each one and identify whether or not it's a mixture or a pure substance. In number 7, you'll notice that everything is the same. And so because of that, we're looking at a pure substance. In number 8, not everything is the same. You have different things that are going on in that picture, and so that would be a picture of a mixture. Finally, in number 9, for the same reason as number 8, that would be a mixture because it contains the black dot and then the 2 white dots overlapping. Now let's go through each picture and identify if it contains an element, molecule, and/or compound. Let's take a look at number 7. Does number 7 contain an element? Well, you might be tempted to say no because there's no single individual atoms. But look at, these white dots are overlapping and the white dots indicate that they are the same element. This would be an example of a diatomic element. Remember, there are 7 diatomic elements on the periodic table. For example, hydrogen. Hydrogen is an element, but hydrogen does not exist by itself, but instead exists in the form of H2. So, picture 7 indeed does contain an element. Does it contain a molecule? Since there are at least 2 atoms that are chemically combined together, that fits the definition of a molecule. And so I'm going to put MO for molecule. Finally, does it contain a compound? To be a compound, they have to be different elements bonded together. But as we can see, the two white dots represent the same element. And so number 7 does not contain a compound. Let's now move to picture number 8. Does picture 8 have elements? It does. It has this white dot, which would represent one single atom element, and then it's got black dots, which represents another single atom element. So picture 8 does contain elements. What about molecules? It does. These chemical species right here are 3 atoms chemically combined together, and that fits the definition of a molecule. And because in those molecules, one of them is a black dot and 2 of them are white dots, that represents different elements, and so therefore it also is a compound. Finally, in number 9, we can see that we do have elements. Not only are the black dots representing elements, but the white dot molecules are also representing an element. Because of that, it also contains molecules. The white dots are the molecules. But because they are not combining to create 2 or more different elements, number 9 does not contain any compounds.